How to know if your child has an articulation disorder. Okay, first let's discuss the differences between speech and language. So speech is everything that has to do with articulation, pronunciation, your diction, the motor component of your mouth, your articulators, your lips, your tongue, your teeth. All these things have to do with speech. It's not the same thing as language. Language is divided into two components, which is expressive language, which is verbal production, what you put out, what you say, what comes out of your mouth, and receptive, which is what do you understand when people speak to you, what you translate, and what you comprehend. So those are the two different components of language versus speech. Speech is diction, pronunciation, language is receptive, expressive language. So when it comes to a lot of parents, they always want to do a speech eval, and they really mean a language eval, but in terms, we are considered speech and language pathologists, but a lot of people just treat it as if it's the same thing, but it's actually not. So in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about articulation disorders. What are they? An articulation disorder is when your child cannot pronunciate certain sounds. So they can't say the R, they can't say the S, they can't say the L. They can't make clusters of a word, like syllables. So those kind of things are considered articulation disorders. There are some articulation kind of milestones that your child does go through from the time that they start speaking to about 4 or 5. So for example, the word dog. A lot of kids, instead of using the D in the front of dog, they might say gog, because it's easier to just say the G sound in both places, in the front and in the back, than to actually make a new sound such as dog. This is a developmental process that every child goes through, and they outgrow. And they outgrow to the next process and the next process and the next process. So these kind of things, which are phonetic milestones, these kind of things are normal. So if you notice your child doing these things at 2.5, it's normal. Now, if your child is doing this and they're 5, then that's a red flag. So when your child is starting off, these kind of processes are considered to be within normal limits. Articulation disorder is more precise for a child who cannot say one certain sound. So they cannot say the R, and they glide it. So for example, instead of saying rabbit, they say wabbit, and it's constant. It's every R at every time in every place. So it's wabbit, and instead of it being car, it's car. It's a W at the end, and if the R is in the middle of the word, it's a W in the middle of the word. So they replace the R for the W all the time, no questions asked. So articulation disorders usually are R's, which we call it gliding in our lingo. So are the L's. So if you can't say the L's either, it's still considered to be a glide because you substitute the W for the L. There's also a very, very popular one, which is the lisp, the frontal lisp. What is a frontal lisp? Is when you cannot say the letter S. So there is a frontal S, which is S. The air comes through the middle. If you blow out, you feel it in the front. But there's also a lateral lisp, which is when kids go shh, and the air escapes everywhere, shh, on the sides, laterally of your face. So there's a frontal lisp and a lateral lisp. It's still, you can't do the letter S correctly. You can't pronounce the letter S correctly. So we consider this to be an articulation disorder. What can you do? You want to talk to your pediatrician about it, especially if your child is over the age of about 4 or 5. Most of these sounds should be done, all these processes should be done, should be corrected, should have been outgrown about the time it depends on certain sounds, but I would say most of them about the time they're 3.5. By about 5 years old, your child should be able to say the letter R, say the letter L, say the letter S, and pretty much articulate everything really precise. The TH is one of those sounds that kicks in a little bit later, I would say 5.5. Even some books leave it until 6 years old. And the just sound too, such as in treasure and things like that, that one also takes a little bit longer. But all other sounds, by the time your child is about, let's say, safely, we want to do like a nice rounded number, I would say about 4. 3.5, 4. So by 4, they should speak perfect. 80% of your language is acquired by the time you're 4 years old. The only thing you acquire as you grow is 20% of vocabulary words, fancy words. So at 80%, you should know pretty much how to speak perfectly. So if your child at 4 years old speaks and you don't think it's a good enough amount and they're not pronunciating things, then you should definitely call a pediatrician, because you will need an evaluation if your insurance covers it. And you do want the prescription to say speech evaluation. Now, if you have a concern about their language as well, then it could say speech and language evaluation. In the meantime, what can you do at home? Well, there's a lot of worksheets online that you can print out and pronounce, different words at different positions of words, different sounds, at different positions of words. So if we're going to practice the S sound, it's always important that you practice the S first alone in isolation. So we're going to practice the S alone over and over and over again until your child can say the letter S appropriately. So no mistakes at 80%. So you want to 5 times, you want to correct. After you do the S in isolation, you'll move into doing the S in the beginning of a word, and then you'll move into doing the S at the end of the word, and then you'll move into doing the S in the middle of the word. Once you go through that hierarchy, it has to be the beginning of the word, the end of the word, the middle of the word. Once your child is able to pronounce the S in all of these 3 positions independently, correctly, then you can move on to phrases, sentences, conversations, etc. So that is kind of like a little bit of the hierarchy on how to start making your child pronunciate sounds correctly. And if you need any help, you can always call. My name is Patricia Ruiz. I'm a speech pathologist here at Miami Speech Institute, and thanks for watching.